Hello everyone, welcome to lesson B18.8 Trophic Levels and Biomass. For today's lesson you need to be able to explain what trophic levels are and link them to food chains. You need to be able to explain what a pyramid of biomass is, and I want you to be able to construct a pyramid of biomass using data provided. Your quick task for today is to think back to B17 and remember what a producer and what a consumer are in a food chain. So write down your title, date and objectives, complete the quick task while the video is paused, and when you're ready, press play. Okay, here are your answers to the quick task. A producer is an organism that uses sunlight to produce its own food. And that's plants and algae. They're green photosynthetic organisms. And a consumer is an organism that eats other organisms to get its energy. So here's the example that we looked at in the B17 topic. We've got a bramble being eaten by a rabbit and a rabbit being eaten by a fox. The bramble is the producer. It produces its own energy using sunlight. The first thing that does any eating, the first consumer, is the rabbit. So we call the rabbit the primary consumer, and we call the fox the secondary consumer because the fox is eating something that's already done some eating. Okay, so now that we've recalled this information, we're going to start looking at applying it to trophic levels. What I'd like you to do is look at this picture. Have a think about what it means. I'm not expecting you to know the exact answer, but could you try to explain this picture in words? I want you to try and think of an explanation in your head, speak it out to yourself if you want to, or hopefully if you're watching this video with someone else, you can talk through this picture and try and explain what it means. So let's look at these trophic levels. What are trophic levels? Well, the position of an organism in a food chain is what determines its trophic level. So going back to that old food chain we've looked at many times now, we've got our producer, our primary consumer, and our secondary consumer, the bramble, the rabbit, and the fox. The bramble is at the first trophic level, so trophic level 1, that's the producer. So all producers are always at trophic level 1. So whether that's plants or algae photosynthesizing, they're trophic level 1. Trophic level 2 is made up of primary consumers, and they're always your herbivores, your organisms that eat plants. So this is trophic level 2. And at trophic level 3, we often find carnivores or omnivores. So foxes will eat other organisms. They will eat rabbits. They will also eat some plant matter, for example, berries or fruit that they find. So trophic level 3. So at trophic level 3, you get carnivores and omnivores. And if there was another level in this food chain, if there was something that ate the fox, that would be trophic level 4. And trophic level 4 is usually carnivores. It's just carnivores. So here's another example of a food chain, and it's been drawn as a pyramid. So we've got some grasses at the bottom. Grasses are eaten by grasshoppers. Grasshoppers are eaten by mice, and mice are eaten by snakes. This column here and this column here are in the wrong order. What I would like you to do is draw this pyramid here, and then decide which of these labels, the pink labels and the yellow label, matches up to grasses and write them in the correct order. Then I want you to do the same for grasshoppers, the same for mice, and the same for snakes. So pause the video here, draw the pyramid, and then decide which pink labels and which yellow labels go at which level. So here are your answers to that task. The grasses are the producers, and they are at trophic level 1. The grasshoppers are your primary consumers, and they are at trophic level 2, and they are herbivores. Your mice are the secondary consumers, they're at trophic level 3, and mice will eat grasshoppers and other small things like insects and so forth, but they'll also, like small organisms, animals, but they'll also eat plant matter, so they will eat seeds and nuts and berries and stuff too. So mice are omnivores. And lastly, we've got our carnivore that's our tertiary consumer, and it's at trophic level 4. and snakes eat mice. They are carnivores. One thing we've not mentioned yet is decomposers, and you remember decomposers from lesson B17.3, I think, which is about decay. So decomposers make up their own separate trophic level, and we draw this down the side of the pyramid. They're not included in the main pyramid. Why is that? Well, if you think about it, if some of the grass plant dies, it's going to get broken down by the decomposers, and the decomposers will take those nutrients. Same goes for grasshoppers. If some grasshoppers die before they're eaten, their dead bodies will be lying there on the ground, and the decomposers will break those down and use their nutrients. The same goes for mice. If a mouse dies, the decomposers will break down its dead body, and the same goes for snakes. So what you can see is the decomposers operate at every level of this food pyramid. Another thing I've not quite mentioned is also waste. So if grasshoppers, mice and snakes produce feces and urine and leave that on the ground, the decomposers will break that down. Okay, and one thing you need to know, this is because it's GCSE Biology only, that's why this information is included in this lesson but not B17.3. How do decomposers feed? Well, what they do is they secrete or make and release enzymes into their surroundings. Now in humans and other animals, we have enzymes in our digestive system which break down our food. But things like fungi and bacteria, they don't have a digestive system. They have this net of cells that are all connected together. This is actually on the surface of a log. So the brown background there is the surface of a log. And we can see that this network of fungal cells is spreading out, and they are secreting enzymes into their surroundings. So the enzymes are coming out of them and sitting on top of this brown log. The dead organism, or the dead matter, the matter, whether that's feces, urine, or dead plant matter or dead animal matter, is digested externally, and the nutrients that are released as part of that digestive process, the broken down bits, move into the decomposer by diffusion. So these cells here, the nutrients are moving in from diffusion, from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. So that's down a concentration gradient. Okay, I'd like you to complete this keynotes gap fill exercise. Pause the video, take your time to fill it in and write it down in your books, and then press play when you're ready for the answers. And here are the answers. The position of an organism in a food chain is known as its trophic level. The levels are represented by numbers, starting with producers at trophic level 1. Primary consumers are at trophic level 2, and so forth up the food chain. Decomposers are given a separate trophic level as they break down dead organisms at all levels of the food chain. They do this by making and releasing, or secreting, digestive enzymes into their surroundings and absorbing digestive nutrients by diffusion. Okay, I've put a few pictures on here to get you thinking, what does biomass mean? You can pause the video and discuss it, or just have a think about it, but press play when you're ready and you think you've got an idea of what the word biomass means. Biomass. So pause the video here. Okay, so by now we should all know that the word bio means living. It's concerned with living things, the word bio. And mass means the amount of matter an object is made up of. And don't confuse that with weight, because weight is to do with how gravity interacts with mass as well. So the word biomass altogether means the amount of organic matter a living thing is made up of. The next thing I want you to think about is which of these foods contain more energy and why. Well, it's pretty obvious. The answer is going to be the mixed nuts. We know that nuts are very high in carbohydrates, proteins and fats, whereas cucumbers are very watery and they have a very, very high water content. So there's going to be less energy in the cucumber and more in the nuts. Nuts don't contain much water, but they do contain a lot of carbohydrate, fat and protein. So how does this link to what we're talking about here with like pyramids of biomass and so forth? Well, scientists need to consider wet biomass versus dry biomass. So that's the energy that's passed on in each level. Because if an organism, like let's say a little mouse eats a cucumber, it's not going to get much energy from that cucumber. It's going to get a lot of water, but that water is just going to eventually, get used up in its body for chemical processes. It's going to urinate water, it's going to exhale, and then some water is in your exhale breath. But the cucumber has got such a high water content, not actually as much energy in it as the nuts do. So scientists need to consider wet biomass versus dry biomass. Now, dry biomass is a better measure because it's just taking into consideration the actual organic matter, not the water, that makes up whatever that organism is. The problem is you have to kill the organism to remove all of the water. So it's not as much of an issue with plants, but obviously we don't want to go around killing loads of animals just so that we can weigh their dry biomass. So quite often we use the wet biomass, even though that can vary depending on the time of day, depending on how much water the organism retains, depending on whether or not it's recently had a drink. All sorts of different things can affect the wet biomass. So it's not the best measure. Okay, let's have a quick look at this picture. And this is a picture taken from your textbook. So in this food chain, we're looking at oak trees. Oak tree leaves are eaten by aphids. And the green flies, you might not know the word aphid. That's another word for them is little green flies. You often see them on rose plants as well. So oak tree is eaten by aphid. Aphid is eaten by ladybirds. Now, if we did this pyramid as a pyramid of number, which is this column here, the problem you've got is it looks like you've got one oak tree, 10,000 aphids, and then 200 ladybirds. Now those numbers are correct, but it doesn't really take into account the relative biomass or size or the amount of matter being consumed. That's why we look at biomass. And in this example, we're looking at the dry mass in grams. So 500,000 grams of oak tree, which is here, is eaten by 1,000 grams of aphids, which is eaten by 50 grams of ladybirds. So pyramids of biomass often make a lot more sense than pyramids of number, because as I've said, pyramids of number only consider how many organisms there are. It doesn't think about how big those organisms are, how much mass or how much matter they are made up of. So why isn't all of the biomass passed on? So when we looked at that pyramid a minute ago, we've got the oak tree, the aphids, and then the ladybirds. What about all this energy here and here, all this biomass? Where is that being lost to? Where is that going? Where does that? Why isn't the pyramid actually just a box? So that much matter of oak tree supports that much ladybirds, aphids, sorry, and that many aphids supports that many ladybirds. Well, have a look at these pictures that I've put on the screen. Have a think about it. Talk about it if you want to, and then I'll go through the answers shortly. Okay, so hopefully the pictures have given you a clue as to why not all of the biomass is passed on. So first of all, let's have a look at this picture of a tree in the top right. The leaves are usually the part that gets eaten the most, and the trunk is rarely eaten. Only some deer will eat trunks of certain trees or the layers of bark on the outer layers, but the inside stays the same. And obviously there's all these roots underground. So even with other plants like grasses or lettuces or anything else, the roots are often left behind. So some of that biomass from this layer of the pyramid is going to be parts of the plant that are not eaten. And at other levels, when we think about animals, we often, we don't eat the bones, and other animals do not eat the bones. They're left behind after animals are consumed. The main reason biomass is lost at each level, though, is because of the release of energy. So respiration is how all living things release energy. In this example, we can see a rabbit running, and that energy that the rabbit has eaten, most of it has been used in moving around, respiring, releasing energy, so forth. The last thing I've not drawn a picture of is feces and urine. So some energy is lost in feces and urine, and then that's used by decomposers and broken down for them to get their nutrients. Okay, what I would like you to do is use a pencil and a ruler, and a mechanical pencil is always best because it always stays sharp. And I'd like to draw a pyramid of biomass using the following data. A young oak tree, 100 kilos, supports caterpillars, 10 kilos worth. supports 1 kilo's worth of blue tits, which supports 0.2 kilos of sparrowhawks. And I would like you to use the following scale. 1 centimetre is equal to 10 kilograms. So pencil and ruler, try and draw this pyramid of biomass. Pause the video, press play when you're ready for the answer. Okay, I appreciate that this task would have been very tricky, but I wonder how you've got on. And actually, if we were in school, I could probably give you some squared paper to make it a lot easier. But anyway, so if 10 kilos is equal to 1 centimetre, the bottom layer of your pyramid, the young oak tree, 100 kilos, should be 10 centimetres. So give yourself a tick if you've made your first box 10 centimetres long. The next trophic level, the trophic level 2 of your pyramid, is the caterpillars, which is 10 kilos. So this box here should be 1 centimetre in length. So if you've drawn this box 1 centimetre in length, give yourself a tick. Now you'll notice in the last slide I was saying you should use a mechanical pencil because blue tits at 1 kilo would actually be the equivalent of 1 millimetre or 0.1 centimetres. So I'll put 1 millimetre. So you could have drawn a box of 1 millimetre thickness, although that'd be really tricky. And lastly, the sparrowhawk, which would be 0.2 millimetres. So you might, if you have a mechanical pencil, have drawn a single line upwards from there, not drawn a box, although most mechanical pencils have a 0.5 millimetre width. So it's okay if you haven't got it exactly right. But as you can see, it's quite tricky because the oak tree being at 100 kilos, this scale still works out the best. So just bear in mind when you're drawing things to consider the scale. And in an exam, if they do ask you to draw a pyramid of numbers like this, they will probably give you a box with graph paper or graph layout on the background, so don't worry too much about that. So to finish off today's lesson, I'd like to write down what you think 3 most important learning points from today's lesson were. So pause the video, write down those 3 main learning points that you've learned from this lesson. And to finish off, please assess yourself against the objectives. Can you explain what trophic levels are and link them to food chains? Are you confident? Are you sort of okay? Or are you completely underconfident? Can you explain what a pyramid of biomass is? Again, smiley, middle, or sad face, depending on your level of confidence. And lastly, can you construct a pyramid of biomass using the data provided? Smiley, middle, or sad face. And as always, here is your information on how to do some further study. I would strongly recommend looking at the book page because there's quite a lot of information that we've gone through in today's lesson, and it can be a little bit complex. There's a lot of new keywords. So have a look at the AQA Biology book, page 300 to 301. Have a read through it. Have a go at the questions if you want to. There is a lot of information there, so I think it's really worth having a study of that page on your Caboodle digital book. And as usual, the other things you could look at would be Primrose Kitten or Free Science Lessons on YouTube, BBC Bite Size, other websites such as Seneca Learning or GCSE Pod. Another thing about the videos I've not put on there is the Amoeba Sisters. And I know there's a very good video about pyramids of biomass on there by the Amoeba Sisters, so have a look at that. Thanks for your hard work today, everyone. Take care, and I'll put some more videos up next week.